Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today on this Thursday morning. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm doing well. I just told you I read my horoscope. I'm waiting for you to read yours.
Oh, well, while we're speaking of magic, I actually attended a magic show last night.
How was it?
It was very fun. I love magic shows.
Really? Oh, I learn something new about you every day.
Mm-hmm.
Let's learn what's on your radar today. How about that one?
Okay. I don't think it's really a mystery why the Democratic Party has lost young men, but apparently the Democrats think they need data. They need insights. They need spreadsheets and charts and polling results. They need to talk, to study Trump-loving Gen Z dudes in a laboratory and find out how they can win them back, preferably without doing the difficult work of changing anything about the policies of the Democratic Party, which probably isn't going to work. Now, on Rising, we've previously discussed reports that Democratic donors are spending as much as $20 million on a plan to study young men and lift up social media influencers and entertainers who speak to their issues, maybe even a liberal Joe Rogan. This is a plan, by the way, that's been universally panned by right and left. Everybody who knows anything about Joe Rogan's appeal understands that he arose organically. He was not hired, discovered by elites. He deviates from political orthodoxies with a frequency that would make him instantly anathema to progressive cultural tastemakers if they actually found someone like him with mass appeal. But I digress. Here's the latest news. Politico obtained some of the early data from these Democratic efforts to understand young men, which, by the way, is officially named Speaking with American Men Project, or SAM for short. Can't help but laugh, but it's a real thing. Anyway, Politico says, quote, the results of an initial round of research shared exclusively with Politico, including 30 focus groups and a national media consumption survey, found many young men believe that neither party has our back. As one black man from Georgia said in a focus group, participants described the Democratic Party as overly scripted and cautious, while Republicans are seen as confident and unafraid to offend. Democrats are seen as weak, whereas Republicans are seen as strong. That's according to the co-founder of the project, Elise Hogue. She also says young men spoke of being invisible to the Democratic coalition, and so you've got this weak problem, and then you've got this I don't think they care about me problem, and I think the combination is kind of a killer. Researchers went on to note that young men, quote, described how the COVID pandemic left them isolated and socially disconnected. They also said they now feel overwhelmed by economic anxiety, making traditional milestones like buying a home or saving for kids' college feel impossible. The degree to which those economic concerns are also impacting how they think about themselves and quote-unquote success of being a man and living up to their own expectations or expectations of family and society. There's another layer of economic anxiety that I don't think I fully saw until now, end quote. Young men's feelings of crisis are connected to their exodus from the party. Politico continues, Sam's national survey found that just 27% of young men viewed the Democratic Party positively. 43% of them viewed the Republican Party favorably. Okay, time for some analysis. First off, none of this is at all surprising to me, like not even one bit. I don't know how much of the $20 million was spent doing this research, but I could have told Democratic strategists all of this over lunch or coffee, maybe drinks, if they asked me. All this stuff is pretty obvious. No, the Democratic Party is associated with the harmful policies of the pandemic. And it's looking like those policies are disproportionately disliked by young people and also by young men. They were disproportionately affected. The Democrats are also increasingly associated with a transfer of wealth from young people to old people. The Democrats are the party that keeps saying no cuts to Medicare ever, no changes to Social Security. We have to keep fully paying for old people no matter what, even as things that young people need, housing, childcare, education, keep getting more and more expensive. The boomers rigged the entire economic system in their favor, and nobody in government wants to cross them because they're such a large and important voting bloc. But Republicans are at least a little bit more interested, maybe, in rethinking some of this government spending, and I suspect young people are rewarding them for it. Generational warfare, Lindsay, that's what I want to wage. We have a massive transfer of wealth from young, healthy people to older, sicker people. And look, I understand that there isn't a lot of political will to start throwing seniors off of Medicare and Social Security. Fine, but something has to be done to rebalance the scales in favor of young people. Young people are delaying starting families because they can't afford to buy homes. Childcare has gotten astronomically expensive. Education has gotten astronomically expensive. The access to an easy middle-class lifestyle is out of reach. It's not out of reach for every young person. I'm not buying into sort of progressive talking points, but things that they need to start off on have gotten more expensive as they're still asked to contribute more and more of their incomes to building up this entitlement state, this welfare state for the elderly who homes cost peanuts when they were buying them, but we have all this zoning regulation that stops anything but from being built, and so we have a housing supply constraint. Nothing new can be built. They made the system that way, and still they're extracting wealth from young people. I think that is one reason, understated reason, and the COVID policies are another, that young people don't trust the Democratic Party. They know that when push comes to shove, they will continue this system. Republicans mostly vote to continue this system as well. You can see how Elon Musk's argument that the bill has to be balanced is going nowhere.
Support both parties, but I feel like we paid money to state the obvious. Okay, I hear you loud and clear on that point. But now we have real data that Democrats really can't ignore. So like I always say, what's the plan forward? And I think there should be a really clear plan forward. So, you can naturally show up in some of these spaces like gaming and sports on YouTube. Show up and actually do the 3-hour interview with the people that we have in place right now. You don't need to find somebody to support you. Trump didn't seek out Trump didn't seek out Joe Rogan to support him. He just went on the show and talked for 3 hours. Try that strategy, just showing up as yourself. People might actually like who you are. Focus on the kitchen table issues so we can talk about, like you said, overtime pay, rent, family leave. They can start to take over those conversations that Trump started and never executed completely, right? We can start to take over some of these issues that require the people in our base that we're talking about, the young people that are affected in full, and see them through. I also think there's a big problem with communicating respect. A lot of men don't want to be, or people, young people specifically, don't want to be talked down upon, don't want to feel condescended. And so if we change the tone a little bit about how we're talking to people who maybe don't understand or don't fully grasp the social issue, maybe just break it down kindly and clearly, especially as an authoritative figure who's studied and spent time researching the communities that are most vulnerable or affected by some of the issues that Democrats are standing on, break that down in conversation. Like you and I talk about different things. I think people can take more away from that rather than talking to them and just always pointing fingers like we see. That's where a lot of commentary has gone, just very, disrespectful, no regard for someone who doesn't even understand a different side. And then I also think you have to have those core values and craft messages with conviction. You can't be swaying every time the tide turns. You can't, quit the party. You can't throw people under the bus. You have to stay tried and true and figure out what the Democratic strategy is. And I think it's time that people get in line and just really get back to the core of things, because the research just proves what you said. We can't take just what people online are saying. We can't just listen to, sometimes we don't want to listen to some of the polls around election season because we find that they're not accurate, like in the case of Hillary Clinton and President Trump. And so they wanted to do their own independent research, and this is what they came up with. And I actually think this should be a good first step to actually making real change for the party, and maybe not just listening to people online, but actually seeing men speaking up, saying what they're looking for.
Yeah, I agree with you on certainly speaking longer in the podcast format is a strategy Democrats should pursue. You can see which ones get it, that Pete Buttigieg is doing that, Gavin Newsom is doing that, Bernie Sanders has always been open to doing that. Kamala Harris is not doing that, but still thinks she should be the leader of the Democratic Party, as I understand, which is kind of questionable to me.
We have a long way to go. We'll see.
We shall see if she's still in the mix.
Up next, a federal judge halted the deportation of Mohammed Salman's family. That's next. federal judge has halted the deportation of Mohammed Solomons family to Egypt. It comes after ICE took the family into custody on Tuesday.
Now, as a reminder, Solomon has been charged with federal hate crime and 8 counts of attempted murder. He is suspected of throwing Molotov cocktails at a pro-Israel rally in Boulder, Colorado this past weekend.
His family have not been charged, and Solomon says they did not have any prior knowledge of the attack. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem previously said the family was being processed for removal and vowed that justice would be served. It's important to note that this is a rare case, and criminal suspect's family is when a criminal suspect's family is detained and threatened to be deported. Political commentator Brian Krasenstein writes on X, quote, "Our laws matter. Innocent people have rights, whether your hate and bigotry want or allow you to or not."
Investigative journalist and Trump ally Laura Loomer says they are not U.S. citizens. It was revealed that he told his family he wanted to commit jihad, and they didn't stop him. This judge is trying to keep jihadi supporters on U.S. soil to possibly attack U.S. citizens in acts of Islamic terrorism. That's treason. I guess the point I would bring to this is if they're trying to deport them right now, I would actually counsel not rushing this, but for a different reason, which is that how can investigators, it's only been a day or 2 days or 3 days, however long it's been. When did this happen? Earlier this week?
Yeah.
Officials cannot possibly by now have investigated all matters of this family and what knowledge they may have had and if there are other people involved.
Right, that are outside of the family.
So I'm not particularly in a hurry to get them out of the country where it will be harder to gather that information. If they can't be held because they're not being charged with anything, they should be monitored until such times as this investigation is concluded, at which point, consistent with whatever processes need to occur, I presume they will be deported even if they have nothing to do with this attack, and maybe they don't. Maybe it's even likely that they have nothing to do or had no knowledge, I don't know. But I would want to be really sure of that before I carried out the deportation, so I'm not sure what Kristi Noem is thinking. Again, it's not about being nice to them and letting them stay here. We have to be confident that we know all the facts, right?
Well, I think what Kristi Noem is thinking is that she's making a political point that the Trump administration, she is tough on people who break immigration laws. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think now is the time to do that, especially when we understand that there are some victims here that are revisiting trauma from the Holocaust. I think there's one survivor from the Holocaust that actually was impacted by this tragedy. And so to make this an immigration conversation when there's actual trauma with somebody who committed a terrorist act, you can't conflate those two things. We have to separate them and do the real research. We also must uphold American values, right? People are not automatically guilty by association. And so that's important to follow by our due process system. I think the federal judge was right to pause this and to actually look into it, because what we're going to do is gather information, piggybacking on your point, not only with the family, but who else did he speak to? If he didn't speak to his family, were there friends? Were there other people who overstayed their visa? Were there other people who just lived in America that didn't appreciate peaceful rallies like the one in Boulder, Colorado, that they wanted to attack in the future? And if we kick them all out of the country to prove an immigration point, then we lose access to really vital information that could protect people, Americans in the future, from similar attacks or copycats or anybody who may have influenced Solomon. So I think that's a terrible decision to make, and it's a very knee-jerk reaction decision to make based on emotion and trying to prove a political point as opposed to actual follow-through of due process to make sure that we get justice. Because I think all Americans should want justice for what happened to the victims in Boulder.
Sure. I mean, it is the case, or at least I've not seen anyone contest this point, that they are undocumented immigrant, that their immigration status has expired, that they were here because they're family members of their father, the suspect, whose work visa is expired, whose tourist visa is expired, so they can be deported. I would not say that should not take place. But thousands of people come here every year and
overstay their tourist visa or even their work visa. And I'm not saying that it's appropriate. I'm saying that if we're going to go
those who have
and we're going to convict
every
single one of them of a crime.
No, we're not convicting them of crimes. We're just deporting them because they're illegal immigrants.
And that's fair to review, but that wasn't even on Trump's docket of people that were he's trying to get out the country immediately, so it doesn't even tie in directly with.
I did see. So I saw some reporting yesterday. There was a news story about one of the, I think it's daughters that he has, saying, had such a promising future and is now going to be deported. How sad that is. And Well, it's sad that the family members, I mean, it's sad the burn victims are sad. Their families are sad. Why are we profiling the family of the terrorist right now?
Look, this attack was motivated by hate, but our response should not be motivated by fear. Our response should be motivated by bringing justice. That's a really important response. And we can't, operate in any knee-jerk reaction space right now when we really need to be the country that pulls it together, comes together on both sides of the aisle, and condemns acts like this, is my main point. And no, I don't think we should do a profile piece on the daughter or the family except for what their ties were to Solomon and this attack in Boulder. That's all we should be worried about. We can be tough on crime, but still respect
it will make people wonder where the sympathies of media folks actually are.
And that's the thing. There shouldn't be sympathies of media folk outside of the family and the victims that were affected here. It's really just about reporting the information in the news and providing perspective, but serving sympathy across the board for an overall conversation about illegal immigration or where we stand in this country all subtracts from the point of making sure that the families and victims of this incident receive justice in this case. And that's what I think everybody should focus on.
Well, right. And they can't go until we know everything for sure. We got to know, did he, was he messaging are there like-minded individuals who could also be carrying out plots against Jewish people? Were there signs at the home? Or did they speak up? Again, I said this yesterday. Oftentimes, we find out that family members of the perpetrator of some crime did, in fact, contact law enforcement. And then there's no accountability for law enforcement when they ignore obvious red flags. This was the case in the, very famously in the Parkland shooter. That kid, his family had contacted every level of law enforcement, from the local sheriff's office, the ones that ended up handling the case, up until the FBI. Everyone knew and no one did anything. So I would like to know, in this case, if calls were made, if people were warned and nothing was followed up on. And we're told we have to be responsible citizens. If you see something, you should say something, and it's on us. But then when law enforcement has no response to these kinds of things, we don't ever hold them accountable.
I know we're wrapping up, but I would ask you, what would be the repercussions for law enforcement that ignored that? Is it like fire the whole police department?
Fire them, yes, fire them. I want people who are in law enforcement who don't take their jobs seriously to be fired, or are abusive of our civil liberties, fired. Fired, fired, fired. I want competent government. They work for us. That's how it should be.
Don't miss over any calls or complaints about somebody. Just make sure you check into every single thing.
Well, I mean, sometimes you get calls that are obviously BS. You can ignore that, but.
Understood.
Next up, Trump is detailing his phone call with Vladimir Putin and reveals whether he thinks peace is imminent, not likely. Stay tuned.
President Trump said his phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday brought both good news and bad news.
Trump took to Truth Social and wrote in part, "It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace." President Putin did say very strongly that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. The two also discussed Iran. Trump continued, "I stated to President Putin that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and on this I believe that we were in agreement." President Putin suggested he will participate in the discussions with Iran and that he could perhaps be helpful in getting this brought to a rapid conclusion.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley apparently criticized Trump on X, writing, quote, "Russia has been receiving drones and ballistic missiles from Iran to use in its kidnapping of Ukraine. Iran and Russia are partners. It is ludicrous to think we would allow Putin to be a chief negotiator between the U.S. and Iran on the Iran deal in exchange for the U.S. helping Russia with Ukraine."
Senator Lindsey Graham, meanwhile, wrote, "I have always believed that Donald Trump is the best person, maybe the only person who can end the war between Russia and Ukraine honorably and justly. I appreciate the fact that President Trump has gone the extra mile by engaging Putin in a positive way to try to get him to come to the table. I have always supported this approach, but to make peace, you have to have willing partners." I don't think Nikki Haley knows what she's talking about, and she would like to see an all-out confrontation with Iran. She's been agitating for it her entire professional career. I think avoiding that larger conflagration is the number one and most paramount goal of foreign policy. So if Vladimir Putin can play a role in not having all-out war with Iran, that's a good thing to me.
Trump said a lot of stuff on Truth Social yesterday about his conversation with Vladimir Putin, but what he didn't say is what stuck out to me the most. I'm really trying to understand how you sit on the phone with somebody who's a dictator for 75 minutes and say, "Oh, we had good and bad news. The conversation was okay." He didn't scream at any point and say, "No, Vladimir, stop. Do not attack Ukraine."
Because he's an adult.
Yeah, no.
I just scream, "Don't attack Ukraine."
I talk
We're all
softly.
doing that. It doesn't do anything.
I said, no, it's not. It's problematic to greenlight a dictator, and that's what it looks like to the rest of the world, that we are saying, "Go ahead, we understand. You have to retaliate." No, we need to condemn retaliatory threats, especially when they're coming from Russia, because Ukraine attacked military aircraft, not civilians, and Russia's killing civilians. Ukraine is just defending themselves after an aggressor came in and tried to take over their country. And so we're supposed to be supporting Ukraine in this and saying, "Listen, this needs to stop." But by egging, Putin on and not saying anything and saying, "Oh, good and bad news came out of this," that is not the same strength in the great negotiator that everyone thought they were getting and voted for on the campaign trail, that said this would be stopped immediately and that he was the only one that can do it. I think everybody's watching this play out and watching now this being their third conversation. They had one a couple weeks ago. They had one in February. And then he's bombing Ukraine right after that and saying, "Oh, the U.S. has no backbone. They're not going to do anything. They're going to continue to cower and not only say Ukraine should accept all the terms of Russia's suggestion that they laid out on the table, which is very biased, but they should also allow Ukraine to be the key negotiator in anything that has to do with Iran," which is ridiculous.
If thunderous denunciation of Vladimir Putin was going to end this war, then it would have ended during the Joe Biden presidency, as we remained committed to, looking tough and strong and reminding the international community that Putin's a bad guy and we don't like what Russia's doing. That doesn't work. It's not helpful. We need a little bit more thoughtful and sophisticated engagement with Vladimir Putin. Doesn't mean he's a good guy.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead. Do whatever you like. That's fine. I understand. I totally get it. That's a better response,
should just
while
say
at the same time condemning Ukraine?
We have to have it's a little bit more complicated than just good guys and bad guys. And we just yell about bad guys and we go to war with bad guys. The world is a complicated place. And there's a lot of regimes and countries that we don't like everything they do, but we ally with them sometimes because they're bigger guys we don't like, and the situation changes and it's messy, and that's the reality of global politics. My goal is to bring the conflict to an end, to stop the loss of life of both Russians and, of course, the thousands and thousands of Ukrainians who are dying. I hope there is anyone left alive in Ukraine by the time this war is over. The war will only end with a peace settlement that is maximally favorable to Russia, because Russia is slowly conquering the country, and the Biden approach of just supplying Ukraine with any weapons it needs to fight back is just resulting in the slow conquest of the country. Now, you did not hear me complain about Ukraine doing this military exercise and defending itself, because unlike some people on the right, I don't take the position that Ukraine has no position to defend itself. Of course they can defend themselves. They are entitled to defend themselves. Any nation that is attacked can defend itself. That's fine. We are not we should offer them moral support. We are not obligated to support them militarily. Our role should be to facilitate diplomacy, and that's what Trump is trying to do. It's a difficult thing to do because of the position Joe Biden put him in vis-a-vis the previous foreign policy.
The blame game, everything is on Joe Biden. We understand, we hear you. But I think it's time to have a real conversation about where America used to be. Democrats and Republicans used to stand firm against anti-democratic aggression, which this is, that Vladimir Putin is doing to Ukraine. And there used to be a uniformity in our government that says we wouldn't allow this type of
Should we say to Iran,
we would just, no, at least change
go to
the
hell,
tone.
we're going to blow you up if you try to develop a nuclear weapon, and then we actually have to do it?
No, we should change the tone around Putin and stop making it an equal thing between what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, and we should talk to them very firmly and say that we are going to continue to support Ukraine until this becomes a stalemate, because nobody wants a nuclear war. So I don't also think that Russia's actually thinking about pressing the big red button, and neither do I think Trump is. And so I don't think that Russia wants to continue to stay in this war and spend all their money either. And just like I don't think Ukraine wants to continue to fight and let people die and have a much weaker military force than Russia. So at some point, both of them have to come to the table. Two Chinese nationals are charged with smuggling a dangerous biological pathogen into the U.S. with the ability to cause devastating diseases in our crops. We'll discuss next.
Being called a potential agro-terrorism weapon, a Chinese researcher and her boyfriend are accused of smuggling a dangerous toxic biological pathogen into the United States, and they have ties to the Communist Party of China. The pair have been charged with multiple counts, including conspiracy to defraud the U.S., smuggling goods, and also making false statements to investigators. Now, authorities say the pathogen can cause devastating diseases in crops.
The Chinese nationals researched the pathogen as university students in China and were bringing it to the U.S. to research at the University of Michigan. The fungus was discovered in 4 plastic baggies tucked off into a wad of tissues. The couple discussed smuggling seeds in it in their shoes, according to chat messages from WeChat in 2022. The pathogen can cause head blight in wheat, barley, maize, and rice, which poses serious health issues in humans and livestock. Officials say it's responsible annually for billions of dollars in economic losses across the world.
Authorities are alleging the researchers expressed loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party and received funding from them. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed the incident on X, saying This case is a sobering reminder that the CCP is working around the clock to deploy operatives and researchers to infiltrate American institutions and target our food supply, which would have grave consequences, putting American lives and our economy at serious risk. So this is interesting. The woman was already here, and her boyfriend was flying into the U.S. to visit her, and he was the one carrying this fungus pathogen. Now, it's important to note that it is already endemic to the United States, so it's already here, this fungus. So this would not pose any additional danger unless it has been manipulated in some way to make it stronger, more transmissible, more deadly. Exactly the kind of research that so many of us fear was in fact performed in Chinese labs in Wuhan to bring about COVID-19, the research that was greenlit by the U.S. that was conducted in China. We know that U.S. funding agencies sought to perform that research, sought federal money to do it. We don't know whether those projects actually moved ahead. We suspect that they do. So whether there was something similar going on here is going to be the question. The material, this pathogen, is going to be tested to find out if it's on a molecular level different from what is already here. And then I'm very interested, of course, by these messages that say that makes it
years in the making.
It's not some kind of like harmless mistake where, ooh, I didn't know I had accidentally put the samples in that backpack and I didn't mean to do this. If they're talking about bringing this in, that's pretty scary.
It is. I'm definitely hesitant to jump into full spy movie. I think we should just pause for a second. But we should definitely have up sensible guardrails because this is a real national security threat and we should be looking into this seriously and they should get in trouble for any egregious behavior. I mean, like you said, this can cause, when I saw it could cause damage to crop and humans, that scared me very much. The communist connections to the Communist Party in China raise valid questions, but like I said, I don't want to jump into any xenophobia and assume that everybody's doing, who's coming here to do research, who may be attached to China anyway, is trying to harm the U.S. secretly. Like, I think we have to definitely do our due diligence and see what was going on. Those text messages from a few years ago make this more problematic.
Pretty damning.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think I want to see it through without completely just, you know, sometimes you get on X and it's just like, oh my gosh, terrorists, throw them out. The answer can't be throw them out immediately. Let's find out what happened. Let's really research what they were trying to do and let's get to the bottom of this. And then if people were trying to harm our country, of course, they can leave.
Yeah, this is certainly going to be brought up in the context of the Trump administration's orders to more carefully vet Chinese foreign nationals coming in to study here, decertifying or preventing Harvard University from enrolling international students. These steps the Trump administration is taking, this will probably make people more sympathetic to those efforts that specifically target the Chinese students. Now, I think it is a bit tricky because people have said, well, they all have to swear loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP picks who gets to come here. I'm like, well, okay, but if you live in a totalitarian country, you're going to say, yes, I swear loyalty to the totalitarian country, with your fingers crossed behind your back, right, to try to get here. I think, I have a hard time believing they're all, like, completely brainwashed, loyal servants, like it's 1984 or something. However, if there is a significant number of them that really want to hamper our national security, they want to come here, use our prestigious scientific research universities to gain dangerous knowledge, transmit it back to China, or go back to China with it. Yeah, that's really, really bad, really concerning.
I mean, the U.S. prides itself on being a hub for, just like you said, huge research, international research. And so there's a space for that there, but there's not a space to try to, like, take matters into your own hands. And so, like I said, yes, it involves Chinese nationals, but we have to avoid, like you said, any racist framing because they could just be doing what they need to do in a country that they're coming from in order to get an education that we covet around the world from prestigious universities across the U.S. and really
it's not racist. It doesn't have to do with them as, like, Chinese as a race.
Well, that's what a lot of the conversation is.
Nation.
Like the fact, exactly, that they're coming from China. So, and then there's conversation around what happened with COVID, and it's like, oh, here we go again. It's like, okay, it's not a problem of being Chinese. It's a problem of like their nation was not handling it properly.
Right, it's a problem of the government of China.
Right, and so sometimes that language, just when it's loosely interpreted, leads into, oh, let's get.
Well, I know, but I feel like that was the other. If you go back again to COVID, it was funny to me that the media would be saying that it came out of a lab, that was a racist conspiracy theory, when their major competing theory, and the one that the media and Democrats and liberals for some reason preferred, was that Chinese people just love eating weird animals, and that's how we got COVID. That's the racist explanation that it came out of a lab accident and having to do with the Chinese government's cover-up is actually the less racist explanation by far, which is why this was such
I think people struggle with having just a conversation that involves people from other countries, and we just need to figure out how to better communicate with one another and just say this could be an isolated incident or this has to do with this, without condemning the entire race of people or condemning the entire country. You know what I mean? Like everybody who is of Muslim faith now, we need to criticize because of this Boulder attack. That's what people are saying. And so people should, I think that conversation, not from you and I, but it easily goes that way, which is why the press was probably hesitant on saying,
but that's not racist
came
either.
from a Chinese lab. It's like, okay, let's just make sure we know.
Islam is a belief system, so you can object to the belief system just like you would object to a political ideology.
Right, but you're saying anyone who comes here with that belief system.
Origin. Yeah, well, I'm right. I'm not saying that.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like people sometimes take one thought or one statement that comes especially from the president, like, oh, this was built in a Chinese lab, and then all of a sudden they just run with it. And I know that's not the responsibility of the president to monitor, but as a leader, you're just cognizant in the way that you put things so that the people who follow you blindly can then interpret
I think we
properly.
can't possibly be skeptical enough of what goes on in Chinese labs. We should not be funding it. The COVID experience should just massively send up some red flag about U.S. taxpayer dollars being used for research in China, and this level of cooperation with a dangerous foreign adversary is really curious, and we are only beginning to get to the bottom of it.
I knew the story was going to give red flags for you. Yeah. Red flag everywhere.
I don't want to die of some fungus like The Last of Us. Zombie fungus taking over your brain. Did you see that show?
I hate it.
It wasn't my.
I understand
I'm
it, but I
over zombies by now, so it wasn't my favorite show. But it's okay. I haven't seen the second season yet. Next up, civil liberties advocates are concerned President Trump might be giving Palantir too much power. Stay tuned. civil liberties advocates are sounding the alarm on President Trump's reported partnership with a data analytics firm called Palantir.
The most recent outrage appears to have stemmed from a New York Times article titled Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans.
The Times reports that since Trump took office, Palantir has scored more than $113 million in federal dollars, not including a recent $795 million unspent DoD contract. Per the Times, Palantir has also contracts with agencies like DHS and the Pentagon and is in talks with the IRS and Social Security Administration about buying their technology.
Government officials told the Times that Palantir product called Foundry would make it easier for the Trump administration to merge data from all these different agencies. A former Palantir strategist, Brianna Martin, wrote on LinkedIn that she left over the company's expanding its work with ICE. She continued, quote, "For most of my time here, I found that the way Palantir grappled with the weight of our capabilities to be refreshing, transparent, and conscionable. But for me, this is a red line I won't redraw."
Many on the right are also concerned by past comments made by the CEO, Alex Karp, and the fact that Dr. Deborah Birx is on the board of the company. You remember her as one of the COVID advisors. Specifically, Karp told CNBC in 2024 one of his softwares helped stop the rise of the far right in Europe. As far as Dr. Birx goes, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie wrote on X, Dr. Birx is the worst type of person that gets into government, a complete hypocrite, holier than thou, telling lies, cloaked in faux science with the imprimatur of government legitimacy, and never held accountable, so she will rinse and repeat.
Palantir responded to the Times report on X, writing, Palantir never collects data to unlawfully surveil Americans, and our Foundry platform employs granular security protections. If the facts were on its side, the New York Times would not have needed to twist the truth.
Yeah, sure, Jan.
Look, we might be on the same page here because I think, this effort was pushed largely by Doge, and Elon Musk was on board with this. I know that he wanted access to people's bank account numbers, student loan information, medical claims, disability status, to know whether they're immigrant or not, political affiliations. And this is all going to be aggregated through a system that Palantir put in place. And I think that leads to massive surveillance, massive Big Brother. I think that, it leaves Americans extremely vulnerable. And Palantir is the backbone of all this data integration, is coming from a suggested outsider in this new Doge era. We don't even know what the plans are for Doge. So this question's really about what is happening with the information, and we should just trust what government says. I mean, come on, it's not about Trump or anybody specific. It's about the American people, literally since Vietnam, I believe, have started to question and not trust exactly what the government says for face value, and that's okay. And so there should be real questions about why one agency needs to understand all this data without using it to retaliate in any way against Americans.
I agree with you. Domestic data collection, domestic surveillance are very troubling trends, even in the best case scenarios, even when the strongest arguments are marshaled for it. I think we should be suspicious. These are people associated with this who the right would flag as globalist adjacent or World Economic Forum or world government supportive, people like Alex Karp, the CEO, Deborah Birx, people who tinker, who don't have respect for conservatism, for the right, for principles of limited government, for principles of localism. They think that crises are opportunities for greater centralized control. These are worrying philosophical undercurrents to accompany this technology that, yes, makes me very concerned. Do you know where the name comes from, Palantir?
No, tell me.
Oh,
I should know that? Okay.
No. I don't know that you would necessarily know it, but it comes from the Lord of the Rings.
Ah.
It is the all-seeing magic orb stones that there's a bunch of them, and Saruman the White, the leader of the Council of Wizards, has one of them, and he uses it to spy on Sauron, the evil villain of the Lord of the Rings. What happens is he gradually becomes corrupted by his proximity to Sauron and his lust for the Ring of Power, and becomes evil, and then helps Sauron, attack the protagonists and the free peoples of Middle-earth. So it is a cautionary tale about using surveillance for good, and how that can corrupt you. In fact, all of the Lord of the Rings, I would argue, is very much a cautionary tale about using government power for good ends. I referenced this yesterday. People should watch in the interview I did with James Lindsay talking about the woke right. We refer to the Boromir moment when the good guys have the ring and they say, okay, Boromir says, now we must use it to fight Sauron. And the actual lesson is, no, you can't use this without becoming corrupted by it. You will simply replace Sauron and there'll be more dark power going around. The weapon of the enemy should not be used, it should be destroyed. Again, these are all very important lessons coming from Tolkien's own philosophy, which was in many ways conservative or limited government or traditionalist in a healthy and positive way. And so we should. So it's funny that the company name tells you exactly what it is.
I know.
Let's be wary.
And also, I think on the left, a lot of people have problems with the lack of transparency and oversight. So, and I know while that is even another layer that maybe Republicans aren't arguing, they're just saying no surveillance at all. People on the left are like, what about everyday Americans that don't want their data cross-referenced for uses that are not explicitly named, but no one is checking you to make sure that you're not using it in any way that wasn't stated? And how can we protect people from that? I mean, there's not enough safeguards to make us not in this surveillance state that will have endless, once we open the door, we can't really reclose it. It'll be very hard. And so I think that is just, when you're thinking about the everyday American, most people, appreciate some type of, we see how many people bought Ring cameras on their own, appreciate some type of understanding of what's going on, but don't also want their data misused in any way. And I think that's a constant conversation, especially as we lean more into technology as a country, as we lean more into AI and all the things going on. A lot of people are concerned about what tomorrow looks like. And I think if we don't start to put some guardrails in place, it could really spiral out of control. And I don't want to, put so much limitation on it that people cannot do things. I just want to, start to craft futuristic style rules about what is appropriate and what's not before the whatever happens determines us responding in retrospect as opposed to ahead of these things happening.
Well, we'll have to make trade-offs, like you said, with Ring cameras, right? That's a useful innovation for people who don't want the packages stolen from their doors, that kind of thing, knowing who's knocking on the door when you're not home. Yeah, that people like that technology. It's helpful, but it will cause the company to learn things about you, and you have to either be comfortable with that and then not use the product, or you have to make those decisions. It's going to be trade-offs, and I want those trade-offs to be made to the greatest extent possible by individuals, by local communities, not by some all-powerful private contractor that gets a government grant and that is run by people who kind of like the idea of world government. That just seems very dystopian.
Because we just have to trust that they're not going to do anything besides exactly what they say with the information. And I just don't think that that's a responsible request to ask of our government or the American people. I don't think so. Former Biden White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has abandoned the Democrats, and she's getting torched for it. Stay with us. Embrace life as a political independent. That particular kernel of advice coming from an unlikely source, former Biden White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, who at just 4.5 months out of the White House seems to be distancing herself from her former boss. And now she's announcing that she has switched her political affiliation to independent. That announcement comes Wednesday alongside a promotion for her new tell-all book titled Independent, a look inside a broken White House outside the party lines.
Chronicles the 3 weeks leading to President Biden's decision to drop out of the race and the alleged party betrayal that led to his decision. Here she was back in February speaking about that alleged betrayal.
There was a disconnect for me, what was happening with leadership in the Democratic Party and how it was truly, as my former colleague, communications director, Ben LeBolt said, it was a firing squad, and I had never seen anything like it before.
In a promotional release, the book's publisher said that KJP, quote, didn't come to her decision to be an independent lightly. She is also quoted as saying, the danger we face as a country requires freeing ourselves of boxes. We need to be willing to exercise the ability to think creatively and plan strategically. We need to be clear-eyed and questioning rather than blindly loyal and obedient as we may have been in the past.
You're reading her quote in a Trump voice?
Was that a Trump voice?
Some on the left, though, seeing it as something of a betrayal by the former senior staffer. Journalist and author of the newsletter Public Notice, Aaron Rupar, responding to the news of the book on Wednesday, posting on X, quote, it's sad that Biden stuck with Karine Jean-Pierre for all those years, despite the fact that she was not great at her job, only for her to turn around and write a book about why she left the Democratic Party and is now an independent.
Meanwhile, Scott Jennings on CNN Wednesday echoed what many conservatives are saying, and I bet I'm going to agree with it. Take this book with a grain of salt. Listen.
I mean, I think the things we've learned in the last 2 years is that the two least credible sources of information in this world are the Gaza Health Ministry and Karine Jean-Pierre. And when she puts this book out, every single person who reads it, reviews it, or discusses it needs to remember that virtually everything she said about what was going on behind the scenes in the White House was an outright lie. And so when she puts a book out, I think we ought to treat it from a source that has a proven track record of lying from the podium of the White House to the American people.
Yes, that is correct. I think Karine Jean-Pierre is, well, I don't like her, and I don't think anybody else does at this point.
I do.
You like her?
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me
I'll
do
be the
my
one.
whole invective. No, I think she was not very good at her job. That's not just my opinion, right? That's the opinion of Democrats now. I love people becoming independents. I'm an independent. That's wonderful. This is not a true conversion to independence. This is an opportunistic move. She wants to disassociate herself to some degree with the administration that everyone hates, and that she is one of the leading figures involved in manufacturing, protecting, defending the cover-up. I don't think she was ever very good on the podium, but it goes well beyond that. She has no credibility. That's not just coming from me. Alex Thompson of the Original Sin book has some new reporting out that I was following last night and this morning. This is on X. He writes that her colleagues, KJP's colleagues, call her one of the most ineffectual and unprepared people I've ever worked with. The amount of time spent coddling her was astronomical compared to our attention on actual matters of substance. Many have quietly fumed for years. Again, I'm not reading from some conservative person. This is Alex Thompson. Jean-Pierre had caused internal drama. She was untouchable because of her close relationship with Anthony Bernal, who's the Jill Biden figure who is very reviled in the Original Sin book. All right, go ahead now.
The job of a press secretary is to provide press with information that is discussed amongst, well, like Carolyn Levitt, you know, she does the same thing. She says what's best for Trump, always. And then if it changes, she says that it changed because their team told her that it changed. That's the job of a press secretary. Now, I'm going to say first saw the headline, saw the news come up on the TV, and I'm like, oh man, this is another money grab, another book.
It is. That's exactly
That's what I thought. But then I went back and watched her interview on The View in March of this year. And she actually said a lot of things that are in line with her new decision. And so she said, I want to look at the Republican Party and ask you, are you comfortable with a government that skips over Congress constantly? And a president that does that and going to have blind allegiance and not make the proper changes to put the country first? And then I want to ask Democrats, who are you? Who are we fighting for? And are we meeting this moment that we complained about of Trump with a sense of urgency? And if the answer to both questions is not satisfactory, then you have not found yourself in either of the parties. parties. And I think that there's a strong argument that most Americans do not lie on the fringes of the parties. So I don't think that most Americans are very far left, and I don't think that they are very far right. I think most Americans are center left or center right, and they want to hear real conversations. Polls showed us that most Americans do not think that some of Trump's, what people would describe as childish behaviors, are acceptable, but they didn't think that the option and the alternative was acceptable either, and the way that it was coordinated and pushed forward in that way. And so I think that the American people feel a lot like KJP because they really want to find themselves in the truth and honesty of who represents them. And just like we saw the number of independents in this country rise, I think there's a strong argument for the fact that people are looking somewhere else and not in a two-party system to figure out what's next. And she didn't say she's running for president. She just said, I am an autonomous individual that wants to make my own choices. And I think we should commend that. I actually changed my perspective, and I think that we should commend anybody who allows autonomy of thought.
If Caroline Leavitt knew that Trump had suffered some kind of cognitive catastrophe and was no longer capable or qualified to be the president and didn't tell us, I would be condemning her.
I don't think
I would not want her to write a book. I would not want her to be in public life anymore. The same goes for KJP.
I don't think that she believes that Biden was cognitively in decline. She doesn't believe that. The book is an angry book about how people treated him. She doesn't believe that. So she's being loyal and honest. No, she's just telling you her perspective. That's what she feels. Just like you don't feel that Trump is a little senile.
I don't want to hear anything
You don't think
from her
she doesn't
ever
think
again.
that Biden has a cognitive decline, and that's her right to think or not to think. She worked closely with him.
She should write a book then about how Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy are real. Sorry, kids, if any of them are watching, but she's gonna come in for a lot more of a vicious criticism on social media. I think that does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. Have a good one. See you later.